And so, yeah, folks on the live stream, this is day 3. And we have a very special guest, Andreas Düss. He's the co-founder and head of marketing at Auralis Botanical Brewing. And it is pretty much the world's first ready-to-drink product brewed out of medicinal mushrooms. And that sounds super interesting. I can't wait to grab a swig when I'm back in Toronto this month. And beyond that, what's more interesting for me about Andreas is that with his entire wealth of learning and knowledge of over 15 years of experience, he now also runs a full stack e-commerce marketing agency at Audacious Marketing, where he's helping other F&B founders not just find product market fit, but creating their brand, packaging design, getting distribution ready, all of that good stuff, right? So welcome, Andreas.
Thank you.
So excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So we'll dig right in, we'll start with your journey. You worked as a planner. You have background in as a creative director, brand strategist, and then founder of your own D2C startup. So walk us through that whole journey.
So recording stopped. Are we good? We're good. Okay. So yeah, I'm one of the founders of Nourish Food Marketing in Toronto. Nourish Food Marketing is a company. It's Canada's largest dedicated agency that specializes in working with food and drinks companies. And we grew the company from 0 to about 22 employees. And while I was running this company, I sold the company this summer, sold my interest in the company this summer, I exited it. While we're running the company, there's a bunch of things happening. A, we were working with an awful lot of food startups. And B, I got an awful lot of data coming over my desk. And so for me, there was always this sort of thing, we're helping all these food startups to succeed. We're helping all these food startups to work. But I haven't really done it myself. So I really was getting interested in starting something myself just to see what it's really like from the founder's perspective and to get that firsthand experience under my belt. And then additionally, I was seeing an awful lot of data about two things coming about reduction in alcohol consumption. People are drinking less, they're interested in the sober curious lifestyle, and also the rise of functional mushrooms and how people are interested in functional food and specifically in functional mushrooms. I stopped drinking myself alcohol about 3 years ago because I have young children, and I found that even small amount of alcohol were really affecting my sleep. They were affecting how I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I said to my wife, I'm going to do a dry January. And it made a really big difference to how I felt, how I slept through the night. And so I said, well, I'm just going to stop drinking. Like, it's never been that important to me. And the problem then was, what do you drink when you're not drinking, right? So I looked at what was on the market. And at the time, your alternatives were pretty poor. It was either stuff that was full of sugar, or it was stuff that was just not very interesting, or it was stuff that just wasn't designed for an adult. It made you feel like a second-class citizen, especially when you were out having a drink with friends. And so I then decided to do something about it. And when I was in my 20s, when I went to university, I worked for a couple of years as a line cook in restaurants in London and England.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just something to make money. I was never a chef. I was always just, a guy on the line. But so I have a little bit of culinary experience and a little bit of flavor experience and a little bit of an understanding of how things work. And so I started experimenting in my own kitchen, and I started mixing things, and I started putting things together. And when it came to a point where I had reached the end of my knowledge, I called a friend of mine. A friend of mine, his name is Michael McKenzie. He has got a huge experience when it comes to food manufacturing and when it comes to food formulation. And I called Mike and I said, let's have lunch. And I ran my idea by him and I said, Mike, there is something there. And he started laughing and he said, I've been exploring functional mushrooms as well. And so I said to him, if I come up with a brand story and a brand idea, will you come up with a prototype? And he said, absolutely, I'll do that. And that took us about a month. We came up with a framework for how we would feel a brand would look like, or should look like and feel like, and what we want to do with it. And based on this, Mike came up with a prototype drink that he mixed and worked with, and we then took this. We ran a test before we did any further, and I think I spoke to you about this test before. We built a fake website. And so once we had a product and once we had a brand idea that we were happy with, we wanted to make sure that we weren't the only ones that liked this, right? And we wanted to make sure that we weren't living in these tiny little ivory tower. And that's really, really easy. And I see this with a lot of the food entrepreneurs I work with now, with Audacious, the new agency I founded, which is focusing 100% on launching and scaling food startups. But I see this with a lot of the food entrepreneurs I work with. They look at their product like new parents look at their first baby. It's flawless. It can't do wrong, right? But that's not true. The market doesn't care. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't falling into this trap, that we were in love with our idea, that we just, we couldn't see its faults. And so what we did, we had a designer create fake packaging with a different brand name. It was very rough, it looked nice. And then we put a one-page website together, an e-commerce website together. And we advertised this drink for sale, or these drinks for sale. But when you hit the buy button, it took you to a page that says, we're terribly sorry, we're just sold out. Leave your email address and we'll let you know when we're back in stock. And then we spent, I think we bought $2,000 worth of Google ads, enough to get about 10,000 clicks at the time.
That's amazing.
Right? And so what we did, we advertised this non-existing drink, and we then measured how much interest there was out there in the market for something like this. And the numbers were so encouraging, the numbers were so good, that we then decided to move ahead. And then we developed a proper brand. We started the trademarking process. Mike started the formulation process. And then once we had something that looked like we wanted it to look, we took this to distribution partners. Because we're an omnichannel brand. We have a DTC element to what we do, but we are focused on retail. And so we took this to distribution partners and we said, here's the first one. Here's the brand. Here's the idea. Taste this. What do you think? Are you interested? And we took it to 3 potential distributors, and 2 of them came back to us the day after, pitching us why they should be the ones working with us. So that was really gratifying. We knew we've done our homework in there, and that's how we started the company. And that was about a year and a half ago.
That's incredible. And I have a couple of questions, like it's running through my mind as we were talking about it. First of all, brilliant idea. I was wondering, did you do a pre-order on the site or what? But I think that this is so much better, that, hey, you're also creating kind of like this need and want that, oh, wow, this is like already selling out. And I really, I want that more, right? So you kind of also created that urge. Did you test like different versions of your messaging, packaging also along? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we did. We had 3 different versions going out at the beginning, but we didn't test our real brand name and we didn't test our real design in public, because in case things went really wrong, we wanted to protect what the drink really looked and felt like. Against a potential backlash or bad reaction. So we tested a different name. The brand story was identical, right? The design of the can was different and the name was different. The design of the website was different, but the benefits were the same. And quite frankly, if you get something in front of 10,000 people, looking at the population online, it's a drop in the bucket. So we didn't have to worry that much about it. But so for us, what was really important, so there are some scary numbers when you start a food and drink company. only about 20% of all CPG startups ever make it to a combined sales volume of $1 million. Now, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. It's the bare minimum you need to actually start building your business. And in Canada, and this is some Nielsen numbers, 82% of all newly founded food and drinks businesses, they fail within the first 5 years in the market. Of these, 47% fail because they don't achieve product market fit. And product market fit is just fancy language for putting a product in the market that nobody wants to buy. It doesn't solve a consumer problem, right? So for us, and again, this is like something when I work with food entrepreneurs, they're driven very frequently by so much passion. It doesn't occur to them to stop and think, am I solving a consumer problem here? Or am I just solving my own passion problem here, right? Very cool. The world doesn't need another undifferentiated chocolate chip cookie, right? It really doesn't. The world doesn't need another undifferentiated hot sauce. But I'm getting a lot of those people coming to me and saying, it's my grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. And what I tend to do, I tend to take them to the supermarket and we go into the bakery section and we look at the category and you say, well, what are you offering that these guys don't offer? Right? And so it is, in my opinion, absolutely essential when you start a business, when you start a food business, when you start a drinks business, when you start any business, that you are very, very, very aware of what consumer problem you're solving. And then you need to make sure that there are enough people out there with this problem that you turn this into a profitable business. Because if you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And having a hobby is all very well, it's all nice. I mean, if that's what you want to do, if you want to bake for your friends and family, absolutely nothing wrong with this. But if you want to make a living, then you have to rethink that strategy, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And I mean, you hear in the software startup world all the time about product market fit, and that's like pretty much one of the things that everybody talks about. Not everyone is very sure how do you define PMF for yourself, right? Like, because again, SaaS, different subcategories, different industries that it caters to. So the definition of PMF and product market fit kind of like evolves for all of us. And do you see some kind of like helping our audience out here? What are some of these differentiated points to consider and remember when you're thinking about product market fit for F&B?
Are you solving a consumer problem is the essential question, right? Is there a problem that happens in people's lives that you are solving? Because that is the only purpose of any business that has ever existed, is to solve problems. It's the sole purpose, and that problem can be if you're wearing an expensive watch, right? So let's say your Rolex. So that consumer problem can be, I really appreciate high-end quality craftsmanship expressed in a watch, and I want to be seen as somebody who has that appreciation for quality watches. Or it may be, I'm feeling really insecure and I need something expensive on my wrist to make myself feel better. So very, very different consumer problems, but solved by the same product, right? So you need to be aware which problems in the market you're solving and then focus relentlessly on this. Now, Rolex would never say, here's a watch for insecure people, because that's not a good brand positioning statement. So they're focusing on the craftsmanship, on the heritage, on the quality, and all those kinds of stuff, right? And we, as a company, so as in my marketing company, Audacious Marketing, we say we help food and drink founders scale successfully. Very simple. You focus on one thing. For my drinks company, we say we help people who don't want to drink alcohol feel less awkward in social situations. right? Because it's an inclusive drink. We create inclusivity. And then one of the very first things that we always insist on when it comes to product market fit, you really need to dial this down into one word. So, for example, what can we use? Car industry. Jeep creates SUVs, right? Volvo, car manufacturer from Sweden, they also build SUVs. If you and I would meet outside in the parking lot and somebody puts a blindfold on us and say, take a seat in this car, and the driver's around the block, and they say, did you just drive around the block in a Jeep or in a Volvo? We would have no idea. Leather seats, air conditioning, very comfortable. But Jeep sells adventure and has sold adventure for 70 years. Volvo sells safety, and they've sold safety for 65 years, right? One thing. So a successful brand will not only know which consumer problem they're solving, they will be able to condense this into one single emotionally charged word, and that will be at the root of absolutely everything they do. When Apple brought out their new Mac Studio, they called it, which I thought was really interesting, they called it the Empower Station. Apple is all about empowering people to bring ideas to life. And so it made me laugh out loud when I saw that they were using the essence of their company to name one of their computers. And I thought it was such an interesting and clever thing to do. So all successful companies in the history of the world, they have known what are they really selling. They know that, and they express it really well. A marketing is nothing but a delivery vehicle for the why, for your why. Why do you exist? That's what marketing needs to communicate. That's all it has to do. The whole thing, product market fit marketing, is desperately simple. And it's overcomplicated by so many people out there because sometimes they don't want to do the work. What are you really selling? Why do you exist? Or they can't because they're putting a product into the world that doesn't solve a real problem. And you can always tell when a product doesn't solve a real problem because it's surrounded by a lot of fluff, right? The second people start using complicated language, run a mile. Because if somebody can't express something in simple language, if they cloak it in complex words, that means there is no substance underneath. Substance will always be simple. Right? So if somebody could come to you and say, this is in simple words that my 8-year-old child can understand, that my grandmother can understand, if somebody can't explain to you which consumer problem, which problem they're solving and working towards, then I leave the room, because these people are typically full of shit.
I love that. And specifically true for food, right? Because that's something that food, F&B, I mean, you're drinking it, you're eating it. It's something that you put into your body. So you really, really want to run a mile if someone's putting a lot of fluff around something, for sure.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? It's a huge responsibility to do this right and to make sure that you do right by people. But from a business building perspective, if you go out there and if you have an idea and you want to launch something and build something, keep it simple, right? I think it's Bill Clinton, KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, when he was questioned about the economy. Yeah. And it is such an important thing to think about this. Always keep it simple, right? The consumer in a DTC environment, they give you 5 seconds. For you to tell your story on your website. Now, if you're in a retail environment, that 5 seconds, that shrinks to 1.4 seconds. So you need to be quick to get your core messaging across. Online, you have more time and you have more channels to tell your story, there is like a little bit more of a gentle curve there.
Yeah.
But you still need to focus, because the amount of, attention is the most valuable currency today. And everybody wants our attention. We want attention right now, right? We want people, the people who are watching this right now, they have 10,000 other things they could do with their time.
Yeah.
So we better make it worth their while. We better give them some value, because otherwise they're just going to switch off and, I don't know, take their dog for a walk, play with their kids.
Or grab a cup of coffee or drink one of your beers, right?
That would be great.
That would be great. I had a quick question around, when you are, I think, just diving into the technicality of product market fit. Say, there are founders around the world who probably don't have access to you, maybe, and they want to kind of figure out their own PMF in F&B. And so would one part of it, from what I understand, is about, are you solving a consumer problem, of course, and what is the difference between all the other things that are out there and you? And what channel, like figuring out which channel to kind of deploy yourself on? Is it retails first? Is it distributor first? Is it online first? Would that also come as a part of that process, like figuring out your go-to-market kind of along with the product market fit?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Again, you need to be really data-driven by this whole thing. Like everything. If you're interested in something, if you're interested in bringing anything, and whether that is software or whether that is, I don't know, tomato sauce, it makes no difference. Become a category expert. That is the first thing you need to do. You need to become a category expert. The first thing is not to build and launch. The first thing is to understand the category. Right? And it doesn't matter, like, if you're starting a new car company, you need to understand the car industry. You don't need to mimic it, but you need to understand what's going on there, even if you want to tear it down. Right? Even if you want to tear it down, even if you hate every single bit about it and you want to do something that's better and different in your opinion, you need to understand what you're tearing down. So before you do, and that's what a lot of, and this is where it gets a little bit painful at times, right? Because entrepreneurs, they're passionate about the thing they want to bring to market. They're passionate about their software. They're passionate about their electric bicycle. They're passionate about the tomato sauce, right? That's what they care about. It's like, look what I've made, right? I'm proud of it. And what they don't do, or what a lot of them don't do, they don't go out and understand the electric bicycle market. Because if they did, or the tomato sauce market, because if they did, then they wouldn't come to me and I look at their COGS, their cost of goods sold, and say, buddy, you're 3 times as high as you should be to run a successful business, because at the COGS of this, your retail price, and it doesn't matter if the retailer is online or is a DTC, or if the retailer is a retailer, the retail price is $20 a jar. Now, the highest comparative price out there for really high-end, handmade, whatever, right, is $7 a jar. What are you doing? And then they look at me and they say, well, but it tastes really good. And I say, well, that's wonderful. This stuff also tastes really good, costs a third of what you're doing. Like, nobody will even touch this, right? So you need to understand, before you enter a category, learn about the darn category, and hardly anybody does that. Right? Whatever the category is, it doesn't matter.
No, that's very true. And I see that a lot in maybe first-time entrepreneurs more than others. Like, once you kind of been through that a little bit, you either you burnt it or you've learned it the hard way and you kind of know about it. But there's this kind of like push to, it's really important to get things done. But as you rightly said, there might be so many things that you need to know about. You might not be utilizing it in your everyday business, but you need to be an expert in your space and be able to know why you're doing what you're doing.
I started my first business when I was 22 years old with a friend of mine. We started a self-publishing company, and we really did clever stuff at the time. We had an automated system. We fed directly into Amazon, and that was way before publishing by Amazon was a thing. We had print on demand set up. It was an enormous amount of work. And I remember being exceptionally proud of everything we did, right? And I went to see our accountant, and I was very ready to be praised because we had worked so hard and we had some really major technological breakthroughs. And I went to my accountant and I said to him, you know, he's doing his stuff and he's looking through everything. And I said to him, he was this tiny, bad-tempered Scottish guy. To him, James, what do you think of our business? And he looks at me and he said, Andreas, he said, you haven't got a business. So what you have here, he said, what you've got here is a hobby, but it's not a business. And I said to him, what do you mean? And he took me through the numbers. And he took me through, you know, what was achievable and how things are. And we had a lot of he had like a 2-hour conversation with me, which left me really close to tears. Like I have never felt so deflated in my entire life, because everything we'd worked for, everything we spent so much passion and time on, it was a complete waste of time because we hadn't bothered to understand the category. Right. So all our financials, like all our technology, worked beautifully. Lots of innovation, lots of interesting stuff, had lots of interesting people. Our financials made no sense whatsoever. You know, the business was not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. And that was such a painful lesson. It stuck with me ever since. And so the very, very first thing I always do when I start something new, I make sure of 2 things. Are there people whose life I can make better? Are there enough people whose life I can make better? And do the financials make sense?
Yeah. Which kind of is a good segue into one of our first questions from the live stream that I was just reading as you were talking about. It's not just about like your passion, but it's about whether it's really a meaningful business, right? And the first question, I don't have a name there. Do you need to consider the scale of the problem before starting out on a business, or do you expand into adjacent markets and products as you establish the brand?
Depends entirely what you do. You know, I work with entrepreneurs who want to start a local bakery. And so let's say they live in a small town in Ontario and there is no bakery. You've got a market, right? It's like you have 10,000 people around you, 5,000 people around you. You bake great bread, you make great cakes, you have a business, right? Almost guaranteed. If you start the same thing in downtown Toronto, well, how many good bakeries are in this sort of circle? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Does it need another one? Can it contain another one? So it depends, right? If you, and this is something I often say, we tend to glorify people who build $5, $10, $50 million businesses. But the vast majority of businesses, and a lot of food businesses, they're lifestyle businesses, right? Where people do stuff that makes them happy in order to feed their family. And that's all the scaling they ever want to do. Now, the fundamental question still remains, are you solving a consumer problem, right? So if you're selling organic carrots on a farmer's market, are there enough people on that farmer's market who care about organic carrots? Yes or no? And if there aren't any, then you don't have a business. But if there are any, then you do have a business. The market decides everything, right? The market decides the value of your offering. There is no escaping the market. So for example, Liquid Death started as a joke, right? Liquid Death started as a joke amongst a bunch of guys who were having the marketing background. And it was launched, it was an accidental success. They launched it as a bit of a joke. It went on from there. The problem Liquid Death solves is that most water brands out there say exactly the same thing. From pristine sources in the highlands of Fiji, from pristine sources in the French Alps, from pristine sources of the municipal water system of Ottawa, you know, all water brands, or most water brands, 90% of all water brands, mineral water brands, canned water brands, they all say the same nonsense. There are some low quality stuff, which is basically just unbranded stuff you buy at Costco, Kirkland water and stuff, and that is just reverse osmosis water that really comes out of the tap. But what Liquid Death did for the first time, they made drinking water hip and an act of rebellion, right? And so now, whereas before, when you're in a club, and a lot of people who go clubbing, a lot of people go dancing, a lot of people who are into drug culture, if you like, MDMA, a lot of those people don't drink alcohol. They drink a lot of water. And Liquid Death, I'm not suggesting Liquid Death is a brand for druggists, that's not the intention, but a culture where water is a thing, all of a sudden you're making water consumption cool. Right. And so that is a really, really big difference there. So all of a sudden I can stand with my mates, I really want water because I'm thirsty. And instead of a beer, like before, you have like, I don't know, like a little plastic bottle in your hand, everybody else has got a beer in their hand, and you feel like the odd one out. And so with Liquid Death, with a can in my hand, I feel I can feel included.
You feel cool and you feel like a part of the crowd, right? You don't stand out. Super cool.
And after you have Prism, how do you leverage sales strategies to grow your sales? It depends on what you're selling. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to, right? The holy grail of all sales is repeat sales, right? And again, when I work with entrepreneurs, especially food entrepreneurs, they chase what's called doors. Doors means basically like as many stores. They want to be in as many stores as possible, right? But that is an absolute fool's game. You want to go deep before you go wide. And by deep, what I mean, you need to prove to the industry that people buy your product more than once. So when you start out selling anything, whether you're a software company and you're on a subscription model, or whether you're selling drinks made from mushrooms, if people buy your product only once, you don't have a business. Because a business that is based on trial is not sustainable, right? Businesses are only sustainable when enough people buy your product more than once. And the 80-20 rules applies like in anything else, right? 20% of all the consumers will give you 80% of your profits. And they will become your fans and your super fans. So leverage sales strategies, especially at the beginning. Do everything you can to drive repeat purchases. Right? Because if you don't get repeat purchases, if you focus on width, signing up as many people as you can, getting into as many stores as you can, your customer acquisition cost will be so high that you'll find yourself in a cash burning situation in no time whatsoever. And you see this an awful lot of time. I mean, you see this with some of the big companies out there, Chef's Plate, like, the meal kit companies. Their customer acquisition cost is between $400 and $700 a person. Acquisition cost. Now think about the insane lifetime value they have to squeeze out of each of these people they've acquired to run a profitable business. Right? A lot of the 7 or 10 minute grocery delivery services that are currently shutting down again. I have no idea why anybody gave them money in the first place, because the numbers don't make sense, right? People get funded on fancy decks that completely ignore the economics out there.
But when the markets, at some point, the markets speak for themselves, right? It's happening now. So there's also there's this phase of craziness. And then an interesting thing you brought out actually, when you were talking about, because we before we started the live stream, we spoke a little bit about the LTV and how do you drive repeat purchases, like specifically in F&B, what are some of these strategies that you've seen working out? I know people do bundling really religiously. Subscription is another thing that I've seen. As someone who has way more experience than a bunch of folks on this live stream, what do you think are kind of like these top 3, 4, 5 things that you can do to drive repeat?
There's a bunch of things you need to do. But again, don't believe people who complicate things for you. deliver value. I mean, it really is as simple as this: deliver ongoing value and on an ongoing basis, make people's lives better, right? That's really all there is to it. If you, I subscribe to, I run my business on Google Office or whatever they call it. It's G Suite. They rename it every couple of months, right?
They do.
Right? And I pay them every month because they make my life better. Right? I mean, they solve the problem for me that I need a word processor, I need spreadsheets, I need presentation software. I want to be able to work from anywhere in the world. I want to be able to share my documents with you. I want to be able to work on the same document with you. I want to do all of these things because that's an easy way to run a business. And they charge me $7 a person a month for that. I think that's good value, right? They're solving my problem. I wouldn't know what to do without them. Like, so they become a painkiller. There are painkillers and there are aspirin, and there are vitamins. Painkillers are important. Vitamins are nice to have. I also subscribe to a bunch of vitamin softwares, software solutions, and they do other things for me. And every now and then I unsubscribe from them because it's like, that wasn't nice to have, but those $10 a month, actually, Apple News is an example of that. I subscribed to Apple News for a couple of years. And then I looked at them and I said, when was the last time I actually used this? And it was like 3 months ago. So once a year, I go through my subscriptions and I throw the ones out that I haven't used for 3 months, right? Because they're not adding value to my life. Business is so simple. And it's just, people think it's complicated and they have to use complicated words and marketing. People have to talk about funnels and this and all these kinds of things. And it's all nonsense. Solve a consumer problem. Communicate it clearly, which problem you're solving and why your solution is the best, and then you have a business. There is nothing complex about this. Or there shouldn't be anything complex about this.
Well, it is hard, even if there shouldn't be anything complex about it. I think it's just the whole act of doing all of that and then running, your day-to-day operations can get a little, difficult, especially in retail and e-commerce. And I've seen it firsthand how hard it can be. You're supposed to data scientist on one side and like a great packaging expert on the other, right? So there's all of that coming together. As you were talking about, the value aspect of it, how much do you think, like the experience part of it, for example, your packaging, the post-purchase experience, how some little, sometimes when you order great F&B stuff, you get in the package, you get all these like thank you letters, etc. They just add lovely personal touch. How do you think all the experience part of that product also adds to your lifetime value?
It depends entirely on what you're doing, right? I mean, if you are building a brand that is based on that personal interaction, then it adds value. If you're building a brand that is mainly, let's say it's a value brand where, I give you as much value as I can for the money you're giving me, then, I'd kind of feel, keep that to a minimum and make sure you emphasize the value. So for example, here in Canada, there is a brand, it's a supermarket chain, they're called No Frills. They run very no frills advertising. It's all like that's yellow and it says, all bananas, they're cheap. It's stuff like that. And it's something, and they understand the essence of their brand communication and what they're really selling really well. And then they communicate it. So packaging does a bunch of things. And I think one of the things you have to remember if you're selling people stuff in packaging, let's say food and drink, if you and I go to our kitchens right now and we rummage in our pantry, I guarantee you that we could both come back with a bunch of food items that we bought a couple of years ago and never used.
Very true. Yep.
So packaging needs to sell twice. Once when you purchase it, either online or in a store. And then when you take it out of the fridge or when you take it out of the pantry and you actually use it. So your packaging needs to communicate its value or the value of the product it contains on an ongoing basis, right? And if it doesn't, it ends up at the back of your pantry or the back of my pantry, and we'll go, oh, when did I buy this? Right? And you look at the best before date and it goes in the garbage and you never buy it again.
Yep.
Right? Same thing with software. I mean, SaaS, there is stuff I bought, which is sort of thought, oh, that's really cool. And you start using it and you look at it, and then you never buy it, you never use it again. Right? And then once a year when I clean up my Mac, it gets deleted. Yep. So it does come down to relentlessly, single-mindedly communicate clearly, efficiently, and simply which consumer problems you're solving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There is another thing which I think for founders and for brands is so important to remember. Brands tend, and I'm generalizing a little bit here, but brands tend to get, especially founders of new brands, they get bored with consistent messaging. I get this all the time. Can't we do something new? We've been running these ads for 6 months. Why don't we do something new? Why can't we change something? Founders get bored, but consumers rely on consistency. Right? Consumers, I forgot what the latest numbers are, but how many marketing messages a day? I think 57,000 or something. The numbers was. It was right. It was insane.
Close to 60,000. Yeah, it's a crazy number. I mean, I can't believe.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if you are not consistent as a brand, then you're putting this neural load on people that you want to sell to, and they then start ignoring you because they don't have the time and or the capacity to think. It's not their job to think about your product. It is your job to make sure they don't have to think about your product, because your communication is so clear and your value proposition is so strong that the clicking the buy button is a no-brainer.
Yeah. I never really thought about like messaging and packaging as almost like your remarketing vehicle. It's a completely great, like it was an aha moment for me, and totally never really thought of it that way. Great.
Everything you do in today's world, absolutely everything, is marketing. Right? The second you do something in public, the second you do something on TikTok, on Instagram, the second you do something on your packaging, on your e-commerce website, the experience that you create for people on your website, that's marketing. When, is it Philip Schiller, the head of product for Apple? I forgot his name. Yeah. He did an amazing presentation. This was years ago, where he said, when we create products at Apple, it's a present within a present within a present. So first is the packaging, and then it's the unwrapping experience of the packaging. And this is where unboxing videos come from. Right, the anticipation, the dopamine release, right? That's all about unboxing video. And then when you touch your product, that's the second present. The weight, the feel, it's all carefully designed. And he said the third present is when you start it up, and how pleasing the interaction with the computer is. So it's a present within a present within a present. And that was so clever, because Apple understands that the simple fact of unpacking your product for the first time is an act of marketing. It sticks with you, right? Whereas when you buy clamshell packaging, you know, that plastic see-through package that you can't possibly open, and you cut your fingers when you cut it off, and you need some scissors, and your scissors can't cut through it, and you start swearing, and then there's sharp edges, and you tell your kids not to touch it, and all of a sudden there's blood everywhere.
Oh, man.
That's the opposite.
Yeah.
That's bad marketing, right? That does not make me want to buy these things.
Yeah.
But for me, it is absolutely amazing how powerful good packaging can influence the marketing message and how it can support the brand messaging.
Yeah. On that amazing note, I've already taken 15 additional minutes of your time, but it was so interesting. I just didn't want to pause. But thank you so much. You've actually given me a couple of things that are, for me, the biggest thing is I've never really thought of packaging, messaging as a remarketing vehicle. We talk about remarketing so much in the digital world, and and how do you remarket, whom, what message should you use? Well, it's all about your positioning and your why in the first place, and being consistent. I think that is one of the first takeaways for me. And the second biggest takeaway is about product market fit, and how it's so, in essence, it's so simple. It's about finding your why, finding why you need to exist, right? Like that's
there's two things. Product market fit is the first thing. It is, as you say, it's finding your why. Yeah. Marketing is also very simple. Marketing is nothing but a communication vehicle for your why. That's all marketing is.
Yeah, lovely. That's the mic drop moment. That's the mic drop moment we are going to pause with. I couldn't have explained it better. Thank you so much, Andreas. We'll hope to have you back some other time again. And thank you, audience, for your questions. And yeah, we'll be back again soon. Thanks.